Hello everyone, welcome to Straight Talks F1. After the week's break, I am back with another episode, and what a triple header it has been. Japan was damn good yet boring. Damn good because of Verstappen's masterclass, boring because of the lack of overtaking action. And then we had a blockbuster event in Bahrain that drew all the eyeballs with a classic strategic tussle that capped off this triple header in Saudi. Now, Verstappen was a class act in Suzuka, but come Jeddah, he's realized that he's got a truly quick and solid competitor in Oscar Piastri. Oscar Jack Piastri. Right after Australia, his home heartbreak, I had predicted that Oscar Piastri is going to bounce back. He is supremely strong. He stepped up in qualifying and he is going to be the lead contender for the 2025 title. And here he is, 5 races later, leading the Drivers' Championship standings. Now, I'm not going to waste time talking about Lando Norris in this episode, given I have talked at length about his mistakes and his tendency to crumble under pressure. So, his crash and all was expected. Not really much to talk about there, except for some things at the end of the episode to just cap off some of the hate that's out there against Lando Norris and including some of the hate that I have given him. So, yeah, I'll address that later at the end. But mainly, Oscar Jack Piastri, he has arrived like a storm to start taking the leader's mantle, not just at McLaren, but in F1 overall. That rise to P1 for Piastri, amazing, it's damn good, and it suits him. I'm going to talk about it extensively. But besides that, obviously, a lot happened in Bahrain and Saudi. Covered Japan previously, it was a rather dull affair. But Bahrain and Saudi, it was the perfect Middle Eastern double, and Piastri ended up winning both those races. So I'm quite ecstatic and happy, I would say. At the same time, seeing the kind of overtaking we have seen in Bahrain and Saudi, the strategic battles, the intensity of fights on track, that is exactly how we would have envisioned the 2025 season to be. But yeah, starting off with Oscar Piastri and his rise to the top of F1. Now, Piastri is an Australian, so there was no doubt about his tendency to bounce back after what was the most horrific loss in Melbourne. Yeah, sure, he recovered to ninth in the end, showed great determination to ensure that he consolidated his result, got something out of it. Those 2 points could be very crucial in the title battle eventually, but it was a loss. For a driver of Oscar Piastri's caliber, that was a loss, plain and simple. He is not going to take that. That is the worst possible result. When he had the car underneath where he was the fastest driver on track at his home race, that is a nightmare he would not want to live again. But yeah, after that, look at the story of Piastri's season. 4 races later, he's leading the Drivers' Championship. 3 wins in those 4 races, and he is showing what he's capable of and why he deserves to be the lead driver at McLaren. Now, again, I'm not going to dive deep into Norris's mishap and all, that's quite self explanatory. But the way Piastri has improved year on year, last year we already saw that with his race pace and time management improvement, and this year with his qualifying pace. Like it was always going to be the case. If he improves like he did last year, he will start to beat Norris. And that's how the 2025 season has unfolded so far. He is now ready to take F1 by storm, show Norris what he's capable of truly, and show McLaren that he's the man they need to bet on for the long term future. And they kind of have already with this contract extension that reportedly has him on an equal salary with Norris. McLaren know deep down that Oscar Piastri is the future. He could win us multiple world championships. We need to invest in him. And it was evident in Bahrain why. A supremely good race weekend. He took pole comfortably when Norris, who was a rather good qualifier, among the young lot, Leclerc, Russell, Norris, they thrive on single lap pace. Some of the best qualifiers on the grid. So when he makes a mistake, Piastri is there to nail the qualifying. And on merit, he's been able to beat Norris this season. That wasn't the case last year. They said qualifying was his Achilles heel. That was one mistake when Norris was comfortably beating Piastri 20 to 4. That was the qualifying head to head last year. This year, Oscar Piastri is leaving no scope to get beaten by that margin. So far, he's been supremely good in qualifying. Within a tenth of a second of the pole position time or on pole in every qualifying session, including the sprint race qualifying in China. He's capitalizing on the fastest car and firstly acknowledging that he has the fastest car, not being diplomatic saying, oh, we do not have the fastest car, Red Bull and Ferrari are quicker, or they are at least at par with us. Norris said that. Sure, he also acknowledged that on average they are the quicker car, but Red Bull and Ferrari are not far back. Which, even it may be true, Piastri has pointed that out in a better manner, saying that the Red Bull and the Ferrari are mercurial in their performance from track to track. On tracks where they have the car that suits the layout, that's when they are competitive enough to match their pace. Otherwise, it's McLaren and the MCL 39 that is setting the pace and is clear of their rivals. The good thing is Piastri is capitalizing. He seems a lot more at home with the car while Norris is struggling a bit. So he's capitalizing on that car's potential, and it's an Aussie at work. So a trophy isn't coming, I would say. He was just sublime in Bahrain. Anybody who saw the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend will understand how good Oscar Piastri can be. He had no major challenge from behind after taking pole. Russell was doing his own race. He had his issues with the Mercedes, but he was consistent as ever to stay there at the front of the field. Got the P2 finish ahead of Norris, who had a rather scrappy recovery to the podium. Ferrari and Max did not have enough oomph in Bahrain, and Ferrari had a decent race. They had good overtaking moves with Norris, but they never really showed incisiveness to attack for the win. So Bahrain was a sweep for Oscar Piastri, and it felt so good. After that win, he came within 3 points of the lead of the standings, and this was the same man who had spun off onto the grass in Australia at the penultimate corner. 3 races later, he's within 3 points of the championship lead. And just a week later, in Jeddah, he's got the championship lead. Like everybody in Saudi was saying that Norris is quicker, he's looking good in the practice sessions, he'll take pole and take the win, settle the scores with Piastri. But when it mattered, Norris couldn't deliver, which is one of the reasons I don't really rate him as highly as Piastri. He crumbles under pressure, and on top of that says a lot of stuff that doesn't really make anybody root for him, at least not me. But yeah, he made the mistake, crashed out in Q3 on the first lap, ended up 10th, while Oscar was right there to take pole. He did everything he could. It was just that Max Verstappen's brilliance, it's just unmatched. It is unparalleled. Oscar Piastri will get there eventually, I feel. Even Leclerc or Russell can get there someday. 0.01 seconds. 0.01 seconds in the third fastest car. Max Verstappen, he's a monster. He's an absolute monster. Like, come on. 1/100th of a second. Last year, he had a dead heat with George Russell in an under par car, and now a 0.01 seconds pole margin. Not as close as the dead heat, but that is insanely close. And the fact that I'm talking about Max in a chapter of this episode that's dedicated to Oscar Piastri speaks volumes about how good Verstappen is. But yeah, nevertheless, Piastri still held on to win in Jeddah. I'll come to the penalty and their clash later. A lot of stuff to decode over there. But yeah, Piastri leads the World Championship after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. F1 is healing. We have an Aussie set to defy all the odds in 2025. Sign me up. It's still an uphill task for him to win the title, Verstappen is still capable of keeping things tight till the end. After what we saw in Jeddah, he's there in the title contention. Regardless of whatever he says, he's there in the championship fight. I am naturally backing Oscar all the way through. Would be amazing to see Max also win his fifth. Obviously, that means Oscar will have to wait for his maiden title. But yeah, that's how it goes. Where does Lando not stand in all this? Sure, it would be good to see Lando win his maiden title as well. And of course, if he beats these two, that does deserve a lot of respect in itself. Winning the title ahead of Verstappen, ahead of Piastri, who I feel has a greater ceiling than Norris. There's no two ways about it. That's the reason I feel this should be Oscar's year to be world champion and a start of an era where Oscar Piastri asserts his dominance in F1. Now, apart from Oscar Piastri, there is another team that's cooking in F1. Williams, 25 points in 5 races. What a start to the season! Take a bow. Alex Albon, he's the man who kicked off their season in a supremely good fashion in Australia. A top 5 finish, and since then he's been just superb. Consistently up there to challenge for the points, knowing that he's got a 4-time Grand Prix winner in the other side of the garage as a teammate who can easily beat him. So Albon has stepped up his game, and that's great for Williams overall. Like, James Vowles isn't delusional to say that he's got one of the best driver lineups on the grid. In Bahrain and Saudi, it was quite evident because Sainz has also started to pull his weight. Just like Albon, he's there to qualify well and even scored points in Jeddah eventually. On track, on merit, it was perfect from Carlos Sainz. Firstly, qualified well, that's crucial nowadays in F1, with the clean air, dirty air issue again popping up. And then in Jeddah, he got that chance to secure the points finish. Because Bahrain was a disappointment for him. He seemingly had the pace, but just that DNF with the damage, it was too much for him. So it was good to see him score points in Jeddah. Kept his calm, knew he had the pace to stay in the top 10, and did his job perfectly. Got Alex Albon right behind him, and the kind of strategic masterclass they pulled off together. Hats off Williams. Last year Haas did the same thing in Jeddah with K-Mag holding the pack so that Hulkenberg could score a point. Now we had the Williams line astern. They were holding up Hazard, who was on fresher medium tires, and even Lawson joined this pack. It was a train of cars from Sainz to Lawson, 4 cars, line astern, and Sainz leading this train. The train operator. It was so cool to see him lead this DRS train, once again doing the same move after Singapore 2023. Bowles would have been dying to use this move. That was the race in Singapore where Sainz won. That race would have put the thought in Bowles' mind that he should look to sign up Carlos Sainz. And of course, when he became available last year, Bowles ensured he got that signature from Sainz. And now, it's starting to pay off. Like, remember, whichever team Carlos Sainz has joined has gone on to improve their position in the constructor standings. He is that man who always ensures his team improve. He joined Renault in 2017-18. It was a terrible scenario. They were 8th and 9th in the standings. And from there, when he left, they climbed up to 4th in the standings. Same goes for McLaren. They were 6th in 2018. 2019 was when Sainz joined, and when he left in 2020, they were 3rd in the standings. Ferrari obviously finishing 2nd last year, 14 points of the championship lead. So he almost left them as constructors champions. And now he's at Williams, who were 9th in the standings last year, and now are already 5th with 25 points under their belt. Their best ever start to a season in the past 8-9 years. And to have Sainz and Albon working as a team together, getting the points finished like they did in Jeddah. For the first time in years, Williams looked like a potent force who are really going to make a difference in F1 sooner or later. Yes, it's just a drop in the ocean at the moment. 25 points in 5 races. They are way off the top 4 teams, but it's a step in the right direction. They could easily cross the 100-point mark this season, which is amazing relative to where they were last year and the year before and the year before that. They have hardly scored 25-30 points across a season. So this is a massive achievement for Williams. Amazing to see the Carlos Sainz effect working already. And as a result of this driver lineup change, Albon has also stepped up his game. Don't know where will Williams land up after the next year's regulation reset, but I hope they are competitive in the midfield, challenging for podiums at least. Williams deserves to be at the top of F1, or at least near the top of F1. Now, Max Verstappen. It's either like he has a banger of a smooth race in Jeddah or a race marred by controversies and penalties. 2021 was exactly the latter, even 2023, partly the latter with his issue in qualifying and all, and then he cruised to victory in 22 and 24. Now, the 2025 race has made its entry into the controversial column. Like Verstappen, Jeddah, and penalties is basically a combination that uncannily comes together somehow. And he won't be liking it for sure because it's a track where he's had a splendid, incomplete masterpiece. That pole position lap, he crashed at the exit of turn 27 in 2021. So it's a track where he excels at, and he would want to have a good race next year in Saudi. But yeah, in this race, turn 1 opening lap, Piastri on the front row beside him, two superbly talented drivers on the front row, and Verstappen pulls off, or at least tries to pull off, the classic intimidating move that he often does to ensure that his opponent backs off. But that's the thing, Oscar Piastri isn't Lando Norris. He isn't like any other driver. Kept his foot in to hold his ground. People would say, sure, he forced him off and all, and he could have given Verstappen slightly more room over there. But that's the thing, Verstappen is not going to yield. If you swap these positions, had Verstappen being down the inside in Piastri's place, there is no way, no chance that Verstappen would leave the space for Piastri. Sure, as Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel said back in the day, all the time you have to leave the space. But yeah, that's how F1 has become nowadays. These drivers like Verstappen, Piastri, they have an aggressive demeanor to overtake, to go on the attack, do not yield. So it is always going to cause a controversy, especially at tracks like Jeddah, where that turn 1, turn 2 section is a bit tricky. It's a tricky chicane like Monza. So it's basically impossible to go side by side and not have an incident. Like, especially when they have a runoff and there's no grass or gravel there, even elevated curves like they had at Monza. Now, how do I see this entire incident? Firstly, I would say like Piastri was right on his side. He was alongside Verstappen's car. He had the better start, and he was right there ahead at the apex, trying to make the corner. Verstappen was basically desperate to ensure he was ahead of Piastri, and to be fair, he did not have anywhere else to go. So it was obvious that he would go off track to evade a crash. If he doesn't and he just keeps his line with Piastri trying to make the corner, two things happen. Either they collide and crash, or like one of them collides or crash or ends up in the wall. Because if you look at it, Verstappen will have the inside line going into turn 2. That leaves Piastri vulnerable to the wall on the outside, and at the same time, he then needs to back out to ensure that Verstappen goes through and they do not have a crash. But yeah, nevertheless, because it did not happen in that manner, firstly, people thought it was an opening lap incident, so people will deem it as a racing incident, but stewards were not in a mood to do so. It was a slam dunk penalty, 5 seconds, valid, I would say. But here's my question, my thinking. Like, Could the FIA stewards have done something to provide a chance to Red Bull and Verstappen to swap places to give the position back to Piastri? I mean, sure, Max would not want to give it back. He wouldn't give it back probably, which leads then for the race control to penalize him with that 5-second penalty. But at least he would have avoided wasting those 5 seconds in the pits and perhaps could have been closer to Piastri, maybe even ahead of him, to have a race long battle for the lead. Obviously, if they would have ceded the position back to Piastri, there was a chance that Red Bull may not see the McLaren again, or at least won't have the chance to challenge for the win. Eventually, if you look at it, both were lapping at a similar pace, especially in the second stint. But yeah, Max is not going to give the position back. There are precedents where he has had to. Jeddah 2021 itself, like even though that race cascaded into a barrage of controversy, Verstappen, like he had to drop behind Hamilton for his off-track shenanigans at the same corner at two. Turn 1, turn 2, even Bahrain in 2021, that's a classic example. He overtook Hamilton at turn 4, and that was outside the white lines of the track limits, which basically nullified his pass. He had to cede the position back to Hamilton, who went and won the race. Now, back then, they had Jonathan Wheatley as the sporting director. Now, Wheatley was the key man to negotiate these penalties and put forth Red Bull's perspective. So, given that Wheatley isn't there, as he's headed off to Sauber to lead Audi's project, Red Bull a bit of a mess at the moment. Wheatley would have managed this situation quite well, but unfortunately, they do not have his wisdom. Eventually, like that 5-second penalty really put a sour taste in everyone's mouth, and understandably, Max would be angry about it. No way he's going to accept such penalties that cost him the race win or the chance to fight for the race win. Yes, he could have won the race in Saudi Arabia. He would have probably seen a battle between Oscar and Max, at least a strategic battle where one of them is chasing the other, trying to put them under pressure. Like Verstappen knows he has a worthy opponent now for the first time since Hamilton in 2021 and Leclerc for that brief period in 2022. So Verstappen versus Piastri, the 2025 Drivers' Championship battle, even after the setback and the tussle in Jeddah, like ideally I would like to see proper wheel-to-wheel battles between these two and a season-long title battle. That would be fantastic. Like I predicted, that would be perfect for the 2025 season. Like Piastri is McLaren's future, so he's the driver who has the higher ceiling, and Verstappen acknowledged that in the press conference, stating how he doesn't make mistakes that often, has been quite cool and calm and collected in his 2.5 years so far now. But yeah, obviously he has the car underneath, and Oscar Piastri himself acknowledges that he's got the fastest car in F1 right now. And on the contrary, Verstappen is facing a roller coaster of a season. After winning in Suzuka in a sublime manner, Bahrain was a forgettable disaster for Red Bull. So to have that sort of a result in Saudi Arabia and Jeddah, I think it's a blessing in disguise. And kind of a roller coaster, the high point of the roller coaster, from where he could see a fabulous trajectory to start challenging for the title consistently. Hopefully Red Bull will have some upgrades so that we see Verstappen and Piastri fight on equal terms, because Bahrain was terrible for them. Like to have a car that's so tricky in the corners and it barely made him finish 6th place in Bahrain. Relatively, coming to Jeddah, Verstappen finished only 2.8 seconds of the race lead. So it's just probably the track layout difference, but it has been quite the roller coaster for Verstappen in this triple header. Winning in Suzuka, then a terrible showing in Bahrain, followed by a classic good podium finish in Jeddah. Now, talking about the midfield, apart from Williams, a lot is happening there. Like one day there's Racing Bulls who are quick, but they can't get their strategy right. So Lawson and Hajar are left without points. And then suddenly they have Haas who's surprised to score some good points and then basically become anonymous at the next weekend. And then we have Pierre Gasly and Alpine, who have suddenly woken up in Bahrain to stamp their presence, scored some points. Like from the looks of it, it seems quite weird to see Gasly finishing in the points. That Alpine car has been terrible over the last 3 years. But I feel that now they are entering Haas's territory to try and be the best of the rest. I think Haas and Alpine, they are the two wild cards in 2025 who can score on the odd weekend when something goes wrong, when somebody fumbles obviously or crashes out. That's the opportunity to get in the top 10. Alpine is doing decent. Haas are showing mercurial pace, but they are showing some. And then we have Williams, who are regularly there to score points. Like eventually in the latter part of the season, there will be teams like Haas and Alpine who will be chasing Williams, even RB for that matter. Hajar has been superb for them, and Lawson was also decent in Jeddah. So I would expect them to score points regularly. It was quite the spectacular triple header. Japan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. Piastri winning two of these three races. Can't really contain my excitement. And while Norris was being hyped as the title favorite for 2025, here we have his Aussie teammate defying the odds. 10-point lead in the championship standings. And I hope that it just keeps growing for Oscar Piastri. He's matched Norris's Grand Prix wins tally already. 5 wins each for both Norris and Piastri. But yeah, this is somewhat of an unfair comparison, no doubt about it. Except for 2021, Norris never had a race winning car underneath him. And even in 2021, for a select few races in the second half of the year. But yeah, probably he did not have the skill and talent back then to win races. Now, jokes apart, till 2021, Norris was improving. He was improving quite well. But losing that win in Sochi, I mean, the impact that would have had on his mind. In general, like Norris has been very passive, I would say. He's never looked incisive to attack Verstappen, never showed intensity like Leclerc and Russell, and their urge to win. It's basically Norris just accepting whatever comes. So it has always been frustrating not to see a driver of his caliber realizing his potential. I said this in the Japan episode as well. Sure, he deserves respect for at least reaching here. 5 Grand Prix wins, that's no mean feat. But as I said, Piastri seems to be the better, faster driver with an aggressive racing mentality that's worthy of a champion. Sure, Norris can still be the world champion in 2025. We could see Verstappen or Piastri dropping the ball, losing points to Norris, and that leads Lando Norris to win the championship. But like that's the thing, people know who's going to be more consistent and stay calm under pressure between Norris and Piastri. It could be a three-way fight for the 2025 title. That would be amazing. But I still say that it's a two-way fight with Verstappen and Piastri. Like I do think that Norris's build may collapse later in the season. If it stays and Norris is in the lead, goes on to win races and the championship, bravo Lando Norris. That would be quite spectacular. Even though I'm completely biased against Norris, these are my honest thoughts. You have to respect the driver. You have to respect people as a human being. And in terms of stats and facts, there's a reason Norris gets trolled. Obviously, he should not have any sort of target. People should understand that he's also human and would not want to read or hear what any person is saying about him in a negative connotation. For now, though, barring the off track stuff, Verstappen and Piastri need to figure out and iron out their battling tendencies. Obviously, they would want to battle with each other, and that does set up a three-way title fight, considering that Norris is always going to be there. But yeah, that's all from mine in this episode. Damn good triple header. The Bahrain Saudi double. I really enjoyed the Bahrain Grand Prix, and even Saudi for that matter. Not as epic as Bahrain, but there was the intensity people could feel. Now there's a 1 week break before the next round in Miami. That's going to be a terribly late race weekend. But yeah, we are up for it. Oscar Piastri is leading the championship and he's going to win or stay in win contention. I think everyone would want to stay awake and watch that Miami Grand Prix to see where does Oscar land up. Can he extend that championship lead and keep stamping his authority over his teammate? So yeah, until then, arigato and stay tuned.